2% of the wealth. You have not moved. Blacks don't own anything that has any value over 2%. So what I'm saying to you now is that that's where the wealth came from. And starting from 1860 up to now, that became what we call inherited wealth. The white society nailed that wealth down. So that now that it's passed on from one white generation to the next, to their offsprings, children, parents to child, parent to child. It's been going on now for 15 or 16 generations. And what does that mean for you as a black person? That means that the average white person, because racism exists, and without racism it wouldn't be important. Because racism exists, every white person is born with 87% of what he needs to be successful in life with his skin color when he hits the earth. All he needs to do is be successful now, is get a scheme in his head and persevere. Because everything he needs is either in his culture, in his community, in his neighborhood, in his family, in his school, in his business, and in his government. He's going to run into it sooner or later just by staying a straight course. And for that reason, you see, Ted Turner and Donald Trump can go bankrupt, become a millionaire, go bankrupt, become a millionaire over and over again. Doesn't make any difference. A black person, if he ever becomes a millionaire one time, you've got to hold on because they never do it twice. Because, see, a black person is born with zero. Why is he born with zero? When a white child comes in with 87%, a black child comes in with zero. Because it's called inherited wealth. I just told you everything is locked into the white culture. And so our black child cannot inherit anything because what we've been focusing on. We have been dealing with symptoms and not problems. For all these years, we talk about how can a black kid cannot inherit food stamps. He can inherit welfare. He can inherit public housing. He cannot inherit a job. So he comes in at zero. He cannot compete against a white child because as parents, you're letting them down. You're not giving your child a fair break. He can't compete. And I don't care how much you're going to scream at these black kids about what they should be doing. They are not crazy. You're not giving them any tools. You're trying to motivate kids. You cannot motivate a child to be successful. Motivation only means giving people interest in doing something. What you got to do, working with Dr. Price, you got to empower these young people. There's a difference between motivating people and empowering. I see all these blacks running around the country, I'm a motivational speaker. That's a pimp and a hustler. You don't motivate black folk, you empower them. Now here's the difference between motivation and empowering. I can motivate everybody in this auditorium this morning to want to go to Europe and lay on the beach and enjoy a good life, lay at the hotel and eat well. I can motivate you. But if I don't give you the money, the tools, y'all understand what I'm saying? And I don't give you the tools, the ships, the boat, the airplane, the hotel, I'm playing games. Am I not? And that's what they keep doing with black folk. They always want to motivate black folk rather than empower them. And what I talk about all the time, all this country, and I'm going to work with Dr. Price on, is to give you those tools. You give black folk the tools, and they'll do the job. Okay? I'm watching the clock. I don't know how much time I've spent so far. Am I fine? 47 minutes? Okay. I got 47 minutes. Let me wrap it up then. So give them the tools. They can be successful. But they won't always want to motivate blacks. And that's why we came out of slavery. What they did, they gave blacks what I call non-economic emancipation. Then when we came out of Jim Crow, they gave us non-economic integration. See, money never entered the picture. Why didn't it enter the picture? Because here's why it's important for you all to remember this. Because at the Civil War, that was the dividing line. That was the first time that land became more important than a black slave. Okay? And that's why you all didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. Okay? Because that was the first time when they said nobody could ever own slaves anymore, then the value jumped from a slave to land. And they said, then blacks won't get any. And you never got your 40 acres and a mule. That means you were vulnerable, you couldn't compete, You had no place to go. You were homeless, penniless, and you suffered 260 years of planned ignorance, so you couldn't do anything. And so then the second compromise was committed. Immediately after the Civil War was over, the North then sold blacks out. They looked at the poor whites in the South and said, well, now that we've taken all the wealth out of the South, because what we really want to do, what we were fighting the Civil War over, was to take the wealth from the South and move it to the North. And now that we got the wealth, you all can have the South again, and you can have those blacks. And so immediately in 1866, the South passed what's called the Black Codes. The Black Codes were nothing but the same code what I told you earlier in 1705 called the Slave Codes. So it re-enslaved black folk. And you went back into second slavery that they called Jim Crowism. Now, what was the effect of Jim Crowism? Let me show you. Up until that point in time, black folk were the primary labor force in the United States because nobody else wanted to work. All whites in America want to be the genteel class. They want to be the lazy class. They want to be able to, the aristocrats. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to get their hands dirty. But what they'd done, though, by that time, black folk were the caulkers, the mechanics, the bricklayers, the plumbers. Blacks made up almost 50 to 60% of all the workers in the factories, in the tobacco factories, and the iron factories, and the mines in the East. In the South alone, after the Civil War, according to the 1865 census, that out of 120,000 artisans mean educated or skilled people in the South, people who could do the job, the work, out of 120,000, 100,000 were blacks. So by 1867, it got tricky. Now that the war is over, America then started their little game with the immigrants again. So between 1866 and 1880, they brought in 12 million European immigrants into America. And guess what happened to poor blacks again? They got booted out of those positions. They got kicked out. In the North, they created something called UNIONS, unions. They created unions and kicked blacks out of all those jobs I just told you about as mechanics and plumbers and engineers and bricklayers and all this kind of stuff. They kicked them out and started unions. Then they put a clause saying it's a white-only union. They kept blacks out of jobs up until the 1960s, almost 100 years. Just shut them out. They did the same thing in the South. They created what's called farmer alliances. Even though 55 to 60% of all the farmers in the South were blacks, they created farmer alliances so black folk could not raise their products and sell their products and get to market. That's why the black farmers were crying over in Tuskegee. Said nobody. As a matter of fact, it just made the front pages of the Washington Post. What day was it? Thursday. Front page of Washington, what happened to the black farmers.